Hi Tom, how's it going, mate?
Joe, hi Fergal. Good.
Oh yeah.
Good, good. I think we'll start off just by you giving a bit of an explanation about yourself, what you're doing, what you do with Rematch. Tell us a bit about it.
Yeah. So I've always been really into football shirts and been a football guy all my life, really. And then it sort of, when I was a kid, obviously you're just following trends and you're doing different things. And I was just basically following everyone else. So everyone is into BMXing, you do BMXing and you whatever, and everyone's into this and you do this. And I never really, because I'm such a yes person at that time, I never really found what I was properly into. But I was always, throughout those different periods, sort of always liking to wear my own things, even charity shopping. Even back then, like, we'd pull off on the BMXs and I'd just like nip in, and all my mates were like 14 years old and like, what the heck are you doing? I'm like, vintage football shirts, mate.
Yeah.
So sort of coming out of going into college, sort of rediscovered what I actually like to do and what's sort of my passions and things like that. And then sort of ever since then, I've gone down the fashion route of want to do fashion, something creative. So then by the time I'd gone to college, I was doing more things like photography and fine art and thinking about doing fashion in uni. Always in the back of my mind to do something in sportswear and football. But obviously at the time when you're saying to all your mates who are whatever coming from football, or they're going on to be an electrician or whatever, when you're saying, hey, I'm going to uni to do fashion, everyone's like taking the mick in a big way. And it's, but sort of since I've really got into that, and obviously uni went quite well and I did a good internship in football, and then sort of since then, sort of everyone, including myself, has realised that sort of football shirts is the way for me to go. But obviously through university, you'll know this, Joe, I did fashion business management with Joe at MMU. Is sort of in those first year or two before your placement, if you remember, all the assignments and all the teachers were saying kind of, look at Zara, look at all these places, like fast fashion is awesome in the terms of we should do a business study about it because, you know, they're getting product to market super quick.
That's what it was.
I know
wasn't it?
this
It was
kind of
focusing
stuff
on the business models and how successful they are, rather than sort of looking at the bigger picture, wasn't it?
Exactly. It was more, and at the time, I was from personal speaking, like kind of naive to sustainability or kind of the what goes on and how the sausage is made, really. And you're just more, okay, that's cool. And you're writing about how quick Zara can get this from there, and these guys can do that. But then kind of as time goes on, and I went doing the internship, and you're sort of almost forming your own opinion because you go from sort of 17 to like 19, 20, you start having your own mind, you're living away from home. You start really thinking about what matters in fashion. And then it kind of quickly goes then from that side of fashion all the way to sustainability. How can we reduce blah, blah, blah. And I think that was the biggest turning point for me. And then lo and behold, I had one internship year and stayed in the Netherlands for another year. And then when you come back to uni, then the biggest talking point is then sustainability, and everyone's doing a final topic.
It changed dramatically over a couple of years, didn't it? Yeah.
It's good that obviously all the students are on it and all the teachers are on it, but just that was the biggest calling point to me, was that shift from like sort of direct to consumer supply chain, rapid, suddenly then coming back after 2 years, and then it had completely changed to sustainable models, is really represents the biggest shift that you could have imagined, really.
So that didn't really happen for me because I finished a similar course, fashion buying and merchandising, in 2017. But the whole way through until the end of my course, it was all about fast fashion. They were the best business models to have because no one really knew, especially I started looking at it in my final year, but there was maybe one or two other people that were looking at it when I was doing it. And
exactly. That was like peak times when it was really, even from a sort of a professor perspective, teaching the kids, like it was just more avoiding all of the wrongdoing, and it was even hard to see that, I guess, in some points that wasn't highlighted at all, and it was more strictly about how awesome the business model was for the owner, but it was never really placed on what's the actual worker doing who's sewing this or any of that. So I guess from when I did that at uni, I then went to work at a big manufacturer of football gowns in the Netherlands, and sort of then really got into the bigger football teams and was working alongside those. And that sort of then highlighted, first of all, kind of how big the football market is. Like I say, I've always been into football, and football shirts have always been my thing. But when you see those numbers on how many shirts are being made for each team, whether that's good or bad, that really opens your eyes up to how much product is out there and how big of a market is in general. And that was kind of the go ahead for me then to focus on that. And that's kind of what I did with Rematch. So Rematch is basically, I've been, like I say, since basically having my own money and being a little kid, I've been able to just go into charity shops with my grandma or whatever and pick up all these vintage football shirts for cheap. I love a bargain.
Yeah.
And would collect them, and I would wear them almost every day. I like the idea of having something that's unique that was also a steal.
Yeah.
So I kind of took all those jerseys that I'd collected over the years, which at the time I had like 500 or 600, and then basically made Rematch out of that, which is basically a platform to sort of shout about sustainability by redesigning the shirts that have already been created.
Yeah.
And obviously, like I say, we all sort of did something in fashion in university, which was like super broad, and it seems like football is super niche really in consideration of the whole of fashion. But I just believe that in your own personal life, you've got to go after what you're really into.
Definitely.
And for me, that's football. And I was then thinking about fashion, sustainability, and like ethics in my own life, and my biggest passion, which is football, and how do you combine those? And that's kind of what Rematch was born out of. But obviously, the football market in general is super difficult to. Well, the messages move super slow, regardless of what it is.
The engagement isn't as fast as it. But I think from knowing you all that time, seeing Rematch become this idea, then it grow into all these different stories that you've told across all these different T-shirts. I've loved seeing it grow as we've got on the mannequins behind us. What do you think is the main objective of it now? Is it to tell those stories, to get people to engage with sustainability, or do you think it's more about just people reconnecting with their teams, or is it a bit of both?
I think the sort of main deal with it is because I was in such a sustainable sort of overly thinking about things mode that all of the stuff that I've ever created, I've never sold, mainly because like I'm really like an archivist in terms of keeping product. I cannot let anything go. I'm a super hoarder. And that's probably why I have all those football shirts in the first place. But for me, it was more, I love design. I love sort of having a say and being creative in my own way. And if I could just sort of spread, basically the rough idea of the business was to be able to take a shirt that people have already seen a million times before from whatever season they've seen it from. So it's already recognizable and the manufacturer's already recognizable. And I would be able to react almost with my own opinion or something that's happened overnight, whether it be something to do with football heritage, a current player, or sustainability in general. But usually that's the secondary message, with it just being a old shirt anyway.
Yeah.
And be able to put that out and hope that almost that would have a bit of a viral shareability, not for money or revenue or followers or likes really, but more just to show from basically an organic base that sustainability is also important in football, and that if consumers who love football and just are into fashion generally or have a football shirt, just have more of an awareness of the impacts of buying any sort of clothes, how much that matters. And that sort of was the whole idea behind it, I guess, was just to get it shared around as much as possible.
Yeah. So I remember this time because me and you were both actually in the Netherlands, coincidentally, both working out there, both doing internships. And we both were going through this same shifting pattern. We were sort of going into the industry, realizing these impacts and just sort of being understanding this huge scale of it and knowing that something had to change, and then seeing this concept grow and then become something that's more than just about telling football stories, but also sort of instigating sustainability within that. I think that's such an important message, and it's such a difficult audience to address to as well.
It's a crazy audience, that's for sure, because football is a really old sport, and it's got almost a super traditional mindset behind it anyway, which you can see with almost all the craziness that's still happening on pitch between players and fans. So really, on the list of things that need to be sorted out from at least a human perspective, I guess sustainability comes super low on that list. But to me, as someone who loves football but is really into sustainability and the actual world over sort of just what humans think, it's really important, I think, to just at least, even if it's only me shouting about it, it's important to make that known about sustainability in general.
I think it is picking up now, because I know that one club in London, they built a new stadium, and they're actually one of the first clubs to mainly have vegan food in there now, and their whole stadium is based around sustainability. Because I work in licensing, and they are pushing the rest of the big football clubs to become more sustainable. They had a sustainable conference over at their stadium. No, it's not. This is Tottenham.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Spurs, absolutely massive club. Because they built their new stadium, they decided, right, we're just going to have a whole thing on sustainability, and they are massively pushing the rest of the clubs. I remember they had a conference at the end of last year. It was like September, October time, and they invited all the big clubs, Liverpool, and they all went, and they said, this is what we're doing, you should be doing this as well. But I think it's quite hard for the big clubs to do that, because they don't have the new stadiums. Like United Stadium's really old, as is Anfield. They're so old, they can't really accommodate as much sustainability as you would like. They can obviously change things, but with Tottenham building a brand new stadium, they have this influx of all new things. They can just go, right, we want everything brand new.
Reset.
Reset,
which is
restart,
amazing.
yeah.
Well, of course they did. Was it Game Zero or Net Zero?
Yeah,
so that was obviously a big campaign. So one example is Brentford. Obviously, we talk about Tottenham in terms of carbon emissions, using vegan food, but when it comes to jerseys, Brentford, they've already said that they're going to use the same kit for next season. We're talking about forest green as well.
Yeah. They make all of their. I can't remember what they make their stuff out. I think it's bamboo they make their stuff out of.
Yeah, and coffee beans.
Yeah, that's it, coffee beans. Because
yeah.
I used to work for the company that makes the shirts for them now.
Oh, okay. Play later.
Yeah.
Nice.
So I worked for them back in when there was like 50 people working for them then, and now Rod Bradley used to be. He's the head there. He's incredible. What they're doing is really, really cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're pushing it really. Forest Green.
It's a perfect partnership, I think, between Forest Green and Play Layer. I mean, I think Forest Green are building their new stadium out of wood.
Really?
Which is like they're going super into it, which is
Risky.
amazing. It's almost like I'm personally a big United fan, but at the same time, I've always just been appreciative almost of different clubs because of, which sounds super, I don't know, nerdy, but because of the jerseys, or I put myself back in the past of what things were happening and what jersey they were wearing and everything around that. And it's almost like, I know there's been a lot of research done about that, and it's kids today more so aren't really following a club, but they're following players and just someone almost with a cool badge or someone with a new shirt or anything like that. And I think that Forest Green in a way is almost, even though I also have come from Bolton and I used to be a big Bolton Wanderers fan, it's almost like Forest Green, it was the team in League Two at the time to support just because you're into sustainability. They've got a really cool ethos. And I think as football grows and as this new generation comes up, I think it's going to be more about who's making those statements, who's making cool product and what players they have, rather than that super like football heritage guy who's just one club only and he's only seen for that club. And I think that's actually quite a cool transition coming up for.
Yeah, I think it can go both ways as well. Like one thing we're seeing, especially, is PSG and how they're developing themselves as a brand. You know, bringing in Neymar, but then also working with Air Jordan, and that's what their kit's sponsored with now. And then also all the merchandise that comes with that as well. We're seeing, and Juventus as well. Juventus do it, and how they have these affiliations with pop culture.
Yeah.
Do you think now that the consumer, when we talk about consumer behavior, do you think, like you say, they're switching more to a brand that they want to be associated with rather than a club because of where they're from and the history? And
I think so. I think it's more, I think there's a lot of jersey culture involved in general, and I think people are definitely more going towards what's cool. I mean, I'm almost certain that over probably the last 4 years, there's a specific, probably quite there's a lot of people who have gone from being a Real Madrid fan to a Juventus fan to a United fan real quick with the movement of Ronaldo and how much influence he has. And I think that's going to be shown more and more over as players and brands continue to move. But also on the flip side of that is how you mentioned like the Brentford side of things, but also like Napoli, they've released already 12 shirts this season. Yeah. It's been announced this Sunday they're going to be wearing a new one again. Yeah. It's amazing. Almost from my side is I was going to put something on LinkedIn the other day is they are doing the single best job in the football market over Brentford, over Forest Green Rovers, over anyone who's trying to do anything sustainable, because they are bringing to the light to the normal football person how bad it is to have so many shirts. And what I absolutely love now, if it comes out on Soccer Bible or wherever it is, and they say Napoli's releasing a new shirt, and they're going to wear a new shirt this season, there's maybe 200, 300 comments of just your average Joe football fan who doesn't really care about sustainability that much going, surely not another one. Unbelievable. Can't believe it. Too many. And it's like, they're doing an amazing job addressing the issue in the worst way, because now everyone's like, oh my goodness, like this can't be done. They're just taking the mick. And I think that with all these different collaborations, and this one's for Chinese New Year, and this one's for this, and the biggest thing about Rematch, and something that I've been sort of the tagline or the idea of it is going back to United, is when they were winning stuff back in the day, say like the early thousands, their home shirt lasted for 3 seasons, from 2000 to 2003. And in that jersey, and it's so memorable now in comparison to shirts that came out just a couple of seasons ago, is because you remember, you know, in most clubs, it's like a new manager, a cup win, and then it's a player gets sent off, player leaves, they then win something else, then there's a big money transfer. And all of those memories, as time goes on, are relatable back to that jersey. And all this sort of jersey for one match or jersey for bits and bobs, and you've got maybe 6 jerseys a season. When it comes to being a fan of that club in the future, it's not really helping you out, because you know, there's United shirts that I see now, and I can't even remember anyone playing in it because it came out a couple of seasons ago. And I've forgotten about it already. And I don't think for the long-term support or sort of heritage of the club that is the way to go, to just keep pouring product out.
There's almost no substance behind the shirts anymore.
It's all just sponsor transfers. That's it.
Yeah, exactly. And
change of sponsor is the change of shirt.
Exactly.
But I don't actually remember any of the United shirts from the last couple of seasons. I only remember those iconic ones, obviously from those glory days, but those are still the shirts I look at and I'm like, oh, I remember that season.
Exactly. Exactly.
Exactly.
But it wasn't even how, now it's more everyone's thinking about, from a brand perspective, they're thinking, how cool can we make this shirt? And also / how cheap can we make the shirt?
Yeah.
To then try and get a quick audience or a quick payment in, I guess. Yeah. But at the same time, you know, those United shirts, especially the sort of middle of the road Umbro one around the 2000s, the kind of one I'm on about, that was super thick, wasn't great for playing in, wasn't really great for the fan, fits really weird because I've got like 3 of them at home, so I still see it. The sponsor peels off after a couple of washes. But at the same time, it's a really, really iconic shirt because of the memories you relate to that. And at the end of the day, that's all that matters. It's not about the flames on it or whatever Napoli are doing there or the fact that it's sponsored by Armani. Yeah. It's more the shirt that you remember, and you instantly have one memory of the sort of the biggest moment of that season to you, and that's where you sort of place it around. You don't place it around the brand or the design.
Yeah. And it's not like the Napoli shirts are cheap. It's not like they're doing what big fast fashion brands are doing, and they're not making more and making them cheaper. Exactly. They're making more and making them as expensive as they were the last time. So it's absolutely. Like 60, 70 euros per shirt. Exactly. And you're thinking, no wonder people are going, no, not another one.
100%. But how long does that limited edition model last for? How many times can you trick someone into going, this is limited edition, so I'm going to add another 30 euros onto this.
Yeah.
And then the next weekend and be like, another limited edition, that blah, blah, blah. And then I just don't think, and it's gone up by another 10 euros. That only works with products that people either think the first time round is limited or they know is limited because of what they've done in the past, and you really know that they're not going to do one again. But surely at this point, everyone must know that this isn't the last jersey of the season. Do you know what I mean? We're only in March. There's 3 or 4 months of the season to go. They've already done 12. This isn't the last one. Yeah. It's only a slight difference to the other one. It's no better, no worse. It's obvious. I don't know. At the end of the day, it's a great job that they're doing, because
I'd personally value my Sunday League shirt more than the ones that they wear.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It'd be good to talk about because we were talking a bit on it, like cheaper materials and stuff. You've obviously worked in the football jersey for major brands. How do you see the material use within football jerseys going? Because if you look at, for example, the bigger teams, a lot of them have regular jerseys where you can buy them at a cheaper price, and then they have authentic jerseys. Now, looking at them, you can tell there's a difference. But what kind of strategy is a football club doing there, where they're making two versions of a shirt?
I think the biggest call out for me is what I would have, or how I would more think of it from a fan perspective would be, and this is something I came to understand when I was working in one of those brands, is the player needs performance no matter what. Mm-hmm. There needs to be an innovation sort of reel. It needs to get better. It needs to be sweat wicking. It needs to do this and that, and the neckline needs to be perfect, and the shirt shouldn't be able to be tugged by the opponent, blah, blah, blah. And these things, whether they're meaningful innovations or whether they're just sort of a little bit gimmicky innovations, do need to be there. And I think there is a huge market for someone like myself, but at least back in the day, where I would there was one point when I really wanted a Bolton Wanderers shirt, and they were sponsored by 118bet, I think it was. And I wanted the shirt that my heroes were wearing, but because it was a kid's shirt, you weren't allowed to put betting on there, so there was no betting sponsor. Mm-hmm. And that was taken off. So there's a market out there for people who want the exact same as what the players are wearing, mm-hmm. with all the sponsor, with the Angry Birds on the sleeve or whatever crazy sponsors they have now on the side.
Yeah.
But I also think there's a huge market for a shirt that isn't made for a player, but is made for the fan. Because even the cheaper markdown replicas of the main thing still almost fit as tight. They're still almost as sporty looking. But there's a huge market out there. If we're talking about money, I know there's sort of, the youth are coming through now, and this generation are coming through with quite a bit of money because of whatever jobs they have or whatever. But at the same time, still the largest amount of money who are buying these football shirts are the mums and dads, mm-hmm. who are sort of 40 to 50. And I would love to wear the same shirt as my son, if I have a son. I would love it, like, for us to wear the same thing. But there's no way I'm going to be a 55-year-old chundler walking around in a match-worn shirt or in a replica of the exact same thing that's cheaper, with a huge belly, overweight, in the pub, super tight, bright pink. these things are a no-go for, but these guys have the money, and I just think that there's a real market out there for definitely what's on pitch, definitely performance, but also almost an alternate lookalike that's properly made as someone who's just wearing it with a pair of pants or jeans.
Yeah.
It's almost
Huge
too
market.
similar, because everyone's saying, oh, what about the material difference? Like, obviously it's miles cheaper, the material isn't as good, there's hardly any innovation in it, but at the same time it's still too close to just wear as a real adult. And I think that there's a real market there for just the older person, I think.
Because one of my concerns when I did start seeing clubs adopting this strategy was that the actual quality of the materials was reduced. But I think you're right. I think it is to do with there needs to be that performance element, like you say, with the moisture wicking, and for the players to be able to perform at their best. But at the same time, does a fan really need that kind of performance as well? No.
Exactly. But that's when you see, I think a prime example of that is fans obviously love things from football heritage, and if they, I mean, some of them don't want to pay the 100 or 120 quid for a new jersey, so they will wear the older shirts. However, at the same time, they might also be wearing the shirt from the 90s that's in large, that fits like an XL, because even though they want to show support for the club, it still looks more normal for them, because it's almost been a switch over the last 20 years of it almost looked like the professional players were wearing a fan shirt, they were giant, weren't really great for sport. Like I was saying, the United one was super thick. It was almost like a jumper that was short sleeve. Whereas now it's more like the fan is expected to wear, you know, whatever. Paul Pogba's running around six pack and he's taking his shirt off after the game. There's no way your general 55-year-old bloke with a pint who's watching the game looks like that and is able to wear that shirt as well as Pogba is. And I think that is actually a huge call out, really.
Yeah. So from your experience in industry, you have a bit of an understanding of the materials used in football jerseys, predominantly polyester. But is what we've discussed this previously, is what isn't discussed is that actually a lot of these jerseys are made from recycled polyester. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, and sort of, is there any innovation going on in terms of sports where we could start looking at alternative materials, biodegradable plastics, all those kind of things? Do you know where the direction it is going to be now for jerseys? Because if they are going to keep churning them out at such an alarming rate, is there any alternative?
Yeah, well, I think that's the issue, and that's sort of what the general consumer who just wants a jersey wouldn't understand. Is it's almost hard to fathom that polyester is plastic. And as soon as if that was communicated in the first instance, then I think people would think already a lot different about it, but they just think polyester is like a cotton or a merino or anything like that, where it's just sort of
magics itself.
You know, it's grown and it's there, but actually it is just a giant piece of plastic. So I think the biggest issue that I've sort of heard about is, I know that it's becoming more and more able to be recycled, which I suppose is a good thing. I'm not necessarily clued up on other materials, because I know things like cotton, I've heard, aren't necessarily the best for sport in terms of like we say, moisture wicking and things like that. However, I've heard horror stories of brands sort of making things out, saying that it's reused plastic bottles, for example, and trolling things and taking plastic from all over, and but at the end of the day, if you really think about it, a green 7-Up bottle and a see-through sort of transparent Evian bottle in a different thickness, a different shape, I'm sure you'll know with your massive stuff, doesn't just suddenly mingle down into some magic thing without any energy used.
Yeah.
And then he's able to just be made into any colour, and we go from there.
Yeah.
So some of the stories you're hearing about brands actually going to market in the sort of Far East countries and producing plastic bottles purposely, the same shape, the same transparency, the same thickness, to then reuse and be made into polyester shirts, is an extreme worry. Whether that's a rumour or not, or whether that's not happening, the fact that that thought has even been fathomed
It is madness.
is a
It's alarming,
madness, a
isn't it?
huge
Yeah,
issue,
yeah.
but also something that's not surprising. But I think that for the general consumer, whether they bother it or not, I would take the recycled plastic thing with a pinch of salt, because no one really knows where that recycled plastic is coming from. And I think we all need to make more of a collective effort to be at least more clear what plastic is at least being used, how recyclable it is, because at the end of the day, if you're not only is it unsustainable to create new plastic bottles to then make and market into then a shirt, also a shirt, and I know you'll agree with this, is a plastic shirt and a plastic bottle, at least the plastic bottle can properly be recycled. It's a million times harder to recycle polyester or shirt, and it's like it's actually a double doo-doo for the planet, really.
I think as well with football shirts, there's more elements to it as well in terms of embroidery in it. There's vinyl pressing on it, but you're right. In terms of the rumours that do go around about PET bottles being made just for the purpose of being used for recycled polyester, it's not the first time I've heard it. I've heard it many times, and it is alarming. And I think is from what I understand is that a lot of these larger sportswear brands, they do use recycled polyester. However, they probably do not like champion it or promote it as much as they would, because I think when you start doing that, you then start getting a lot more pressure on you and sort of saying, okay, cool, where's that come from? Where's your traceability behind that? Where's the transparency? And I think that's the reason why a lot of them do it. Another element to it is that PET bottles, even after being recycled, are known to actually perform better than polyester that is just spun virgin polyester, and it actually performs better. It's a stronger, more durable plastic, which is also another interesting element to that. But for me, it would be interesting to see where sportswear, and with football jerseys as well, can look at all the different materials that are used in a football jersey or in the full kit, and see how they can utilize all those materials in a different way or innovate. Because I think the performance innovation is there, but if we're still sticking to recycled polyester, which is showing to have even more complicated supply chain issues, then we're just going to go down another problem in itself.
And I think it's almost, for me, and on most of the big football websites, I mean, there's not loads of people out there producing shirts. So really, I guess they're all classed as big, because there must only be a maximum of probably 15, 16 that are on any professional team. Mm-hmm. But I would say one of the unfortunate problems, I would say, with the whole thing is, I think everything in fashion, as we know, comes down to marketing. Mm-hmm. And I think some are screaming about the reusing stuff more than others, and maybe the others are doing just as, or if not a better job, but it's actually more of a perception and marketing budget thing on how much you really think that's working. And it's kind of a weird line that's being travelled now with shout about it more and possibly be scrutinised more, or just do the right thing and stay quiet, because also a lot of these brands have lifestyle collections, they have a million other things going on, and they would know surely that you can't scream about a recycled collection. And this happens a lot in sort of other types of fashion as well, is they have one recyclable collection and they absolutely scream to the door about that. But the biggest issue is the moneymaker, the always available sort of stuff, isn't anything to do with recycled. And it's like, sure, you can sell 5 pieces online for 300 quid that's sort of been like sewn together and looks really cool and it's patchwork, whatever, and brag about that. But really, your sort of Far East hoodie that's been made for like £1 is really the one that's driving your business, you know. And that's a really weird line to be crossing.
I agree with that. I think what the main issue is that the bigger the brand, the more knowledge you have behind the supply chain. And that's why a lot of big brands aren't particularly shouting about it, because the more you develop your supply chain, the more you can see how difficult it is to track these things. Like polyester it's nigh on impossible to track the whole supply chain back to where it was got in fossil fuels. So for big brands to then shout about these certifications that they've got and say, right, we've got recycled polyester, is a bit stupid, because then they're going to get massively scrutinized, and they actually can't prove where it's from, because it's just such a big supply chain. So I think that's one of the reasons why they don't shout about it. It's because they actually have the knowledge behind not knowing where it comes from. Whereas the small brands don't, fast fashion brands.
And we're talking about it now, and that's one thing I uber believe about the next generation. You can't predict anything, but the next generation below us aren't going to stand for the things that can't be traced. It always seems at the moment that even though it's been shouted about more, it's really those like holding the whole world on your back, saying, transparency and following things. But I know the majority of the next generation aren't going to stand for that. And the more you can get that in your head now as someone who's in a brand like that, to sort of at least be doing that work beforehand, is going to pay off massively for you, because eventually, there's websites out there now anyway, but you can go onto a website and instead of looking directly for a specific brand, you would more go to this website that's saying how sustainable or how traceable or how well rated in terms of the ecosystem this is rated for, and you would be typing it into there, and people are going to be using that like a Bible, I believe, in the future. And they're only going to be trusting things that are on that website. So the earlier you can get onto that sort of stuff now, the better for your business.
I think
you're seeing the technology start to come about already, aren't you? Like there's platforms for industry like Textile Exchange. They've already started setting up these huge transparency programs, whether it's material index or
general information on their website. They've got all sorts.
Supply chains, where factories are based, all these kind of things. I think those platforms are being there, but it's about centralizing them. And I think obviously everyone's going to have their own incentives or ways to make money doing those kind of systems. But I think if it becomes centralized, and then it becomes accessible for the public, because there is the access out there. However, we work in industry, and we know how to get there. We know how to get there, but also sometimes even if we know how to get there, it's still quite difficult. And it's, if you look on a lot of big brand websites, the amount of digging you have to do to actually get to the information that you actually want, it's quite challenging.
I think with the football industry, though, it is, I would say it has a stepping stone ahead of everyone else already, because they have so much to do with licensing. Like their football shirts, most of them, the ones, they have the special tag on them, which has to be specially made, and you have to get the factories out in Southeast Asia have to then get a license to get those. So there's certain standards that football teams have to go by, or they should go by. They have the opportunity to go by, to make those certifications and those factories up to a level. Because I work in licensing, and we work with some of the big brands for children's wear, and they don't really do anything at the moment, but they have the platform to go ahead and actually become way more sustainable, which is, I think they're ahead of the game already, because they have to license their stuff. They've got a stepping stone to just go ahead and do what they want.
And that's the general thing as well. Is it's amazing that you think that football is one step ahead, because that's already a really big statement. Because realistically, in the grand scheme of things, is football should almost be last in terms of priorities of just recognizability about the sustainability issues in fashion.
Yeah, you're right.
And it's like, if you could nail that now as a brand, or as a, forget that, as a sport, if you could be the ones to nail sort of more of a sustainable approach, and be the first ones in sport and fashion to nail that collectively, it would, I don't know, it's one of those sort of dream things, but that would be the
it'd be a game changer.
But it would be amazing generally for football. And I think that actually the companies who might be afraid of spending a little bit more on making something sustainable or whatever they're doing with the marketing, I think it would pay off a million times over to be able to be the first ones to say that, rather, because you do not want to be the last one with this stuff. That's for sure with any of these fashion brands. You know, like the last sort of high-end fashion brand to drop fur is going to be the one that suffers the most. And you see that stuff now, like suddenly you're on LinkedIn or you're typing on a website and it says whatever high-end brand drops fur, and I'm just thinking, there was other brands that did that 6 years ago. Like, it doesn't look good to be the 50th guy in the queue going, look at me. It's better to be either don't do it all and just stick to your guns, or be the first set of or group of people to really give it a go.
Yeah, and I think as well, you're not going to get many more brands that are more desirable or people are devoted to than a football club.
No.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, arguably, you can look at maybe high-end fashion, people's devotion to design, and also that hype beast culture as well to the sneaker industry. But bottom line, football club is a passion you'll have potentially for the rest of your life. You'll follow one club. I know I certainly will.
Yeah, same.
So I know that if my club does something, or I see a club that are devoted to a good cause, you're gonna admire them. And it's so good for their own brand value that
it's a brag value as well.
Exactly.
Well, you see that on the high street, especially here in Manchester. I used to work in Selfridges, and you see people literally hopping between Balenciaga, Gucci, then it's Valentino, then it's this, then it's that, like hotcakes. But like you say, if you have a club, you really have a club, and you're with that club through thick and thin. And if your club's also got values, that's the cherry on the cake, really, to be fair, because even if that's how you sort of get people who don't care into it, is by saying, this is our new shirt, and guess what? You've done that. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And the day we're in a stadium and you're giving the opposition grief because they're wearing a plastic shirt and you're not, is the day that I'm just living for right now. It's like,
it'll come.
Like, forget the players, forget the scoreline. It's just like, your shirt's not sustainable. And everyone's just like... That's the ideal like nerd world that I live in. But
I'm sure I'll see a tear falling down your face when that happens, and a smile.
I've completed it if that happens.
I love that.
I was just going to say, I think they have so much sway in the general public. I think, especially in the UK, I've heard many of my friends say that football is their life, because some people that's just what they live for, and 100%. If they've got that much sway, I think that they've got the opportunity to just change a whole culture.
Yeah, and that's personally why I love football so much. Is there's so much going on in life right now, especially, well, I mean for everyone definitely, but for young people with the internet, with their massive information, it's like, where do I turn to? What do I stick with? What opinion do I stand by? Who do I believe? Blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, if you know that you've got a game to watch on Saturday, that is another reason to keep living until the next weekend, regardless of the scoreline, because as soon as you win or lose that game, you're just as motivated to win or lose the next game.
Yeah.
And that's, for me, the absolute essence of football. Every game's different. The game changes all the time. It's really about just living for the next weekend in the best way possible. And I think that, like you say, if the values came alongside that, because at the end of the day, football reminds me of fashion in the terms of, I question myself almost every day thinking, like, for example, I have a little sister, she's 12. I had no idea what I wanted to do when I was like BMXing or just saying yes to my mates or doing whatever, and never really thinking about what I want to do. She's wanted to be a doctor since she could speak. She's already doing all these kind of crazy GCSEs, wants to go to Oxford or Cambridge, wants to be a doctor, wants to do something amazing, and she's so focused, and that's amazing to me. And I'm like outside thinking, oh my God, I'm doing fashion, which is pointless. And I love football, which is pointless. But at the exact same time is, as well as she's saving people, what people don't quite realise yet is whatever industry you're in, if we don't help with the sustainability lark, then the world's going to explode anyway. it's all going to go down the pan. And it doesn't matter
pointless.
whether there's doctors or there's anyone living, because it really is, and it sounds weird, but for me, it really is just as important, this whole sustainability in whatever industry you're in, to be pushing for that, because it is literally the be all and end all. And unfortunately, a lot of people at the moment, you can't see the wood for the trees with it, because it just feels like it isn't a thing, but it is such a thing.
Yeah, effectively, we're doctors of the planet.
Yes, exactly.
We're just helping the planet survive instead of people.
Yeah. The £50,000 degree was absolutely worth it.
But you're right. It's about finding your passions, seeing where you can connect them, and then do something positive with them.
Yeah.
And I think we're probably all in the same field, where you go into an industry and I'm like, what are we doing here? Like, what's the real goal or objective of this? Because if I'm seeing all these issues around the world and nothing's changing, and then I'm seeing nothing change in my industry, then why is that happening?
Yeah.
And then being able to take that into yourself and then be like, actually, there is something I can do here. There is problems, and then addressing them. And
Exactly.
the fact you've been able to find so many of these niche hobbies and then bring them all together into one, I think it's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
I think what would be really cool to round up, because we could talk to you all day.
Yeah.
Honestly, we could. But I think it's what would be really cool to know with you. Obviously, I know you're moving abroad soon. Got something new coming up for you, a new start. Where do you see your future going with Rematch, but also in terms of how you want to influence the industry?
I think one of the biggest things that I've been sort of battling with over the last few years, especially with Rematch, is you're allowed your own opinion and you can share that as much as you want. But unfortunately, like I was saying with the marketing thing, with how the fashion industry is, if you're not paying someone cool to wear your stuff, if your stuff isn't in the limelight for X or Y reasons, and usually that isn't under the sustainability ideal, it's more like, who's the coolest guy, who's just been on Love Island, who's the best footballer, whatever. That's really the way that I think fashion businesses are going. And just kind of like we were saying then with the sort of analogy between being a doctor or doing football jerseys, is that's what I'm into. There's 8 billion people on the planet. You shouldn't go about life going after something that you don't necessarily care about. You should be going all in on whatever your passion is. You should be going after it 100%. And I actually think that to question yourself, regardless of how pointless you think your favourite thing is, to turn you back on the overall industry when you know that there's issues, like you were saying, is the wrong thing to do. And everyone should be trying to make an attempt to make the biggest change on the biggest scale. And that starts with your own voice and spreading that out. And that's kind of what I believe, and that's kind of what I'm going to try and go after with whatever route I can go after within football.
Yeah.
So spreading the word of sustainability, basically any way you can.
Spreading the word and just spreading the word of kind of how amazing football is, really, but definitely taking I'll carry the sustainability thing on my back as much as I can in football. Like, that is really what I'm about. And I just think that it's so easy nowadays, like I was saying, to be able to turn you back on the bigger issue. But the more you changing something by 5% that's going across the whole world is a huge change. Yeah. Apart from just doing everyone can do their little amazing crocheting. This is like my crocheting at home, like knitting with my grandma. And that can go so far to 700 Instagram followers. But if you can do things on a bigger scale, even the smallest amount of changes can have the biggest effect. And I think that we shouldn't be shying away from that, because those big numbers are going to continue regardless.
Yeah. It's that cumulative impact, isn't it? If we can all do our own bit in our own way,
exactly,
collectively, that's going to make a huge difference.
Yeah, I think that's it. You just do a little bit at a time, but as much as you can as well.
Yeah.
Tom, it's been a pleasure, mate.
Cheers, guys.
I've loved that conversation.
Thank you.